We are talking about Warrior 2 today and what Warrior 2 can do for our legs and our pelvis and helping us gain more mobility and more strength. It's going to be good. So you are going to need a buckled strap and a block and a little bit of wall space to be able to explore. So let's begin in legs up the wall. Come join me. So here we are, legs up the wall. Now lots of people make the initial mistake of coming too close to the wall. Even though they can actually do it, they come too close. Because just because you can do it doesn't mean you actually have the function to do it. I call it the distinction between capacity and capability. So you might have the capacity to go legs up the wall, but not the actual capability. So how do you decide, or how do you determine if you have capacity and capability? Okay, well, first of all, if you can get right up to the wall, then you've obviously got the capacity to do it. But if you're not feeling that great, if there's some kind of strain in your back or your SI or further up the chain to your face, chances are you don't currently have the capability. So always push back a little bit if you need to. And as we move through some of this leg work, then you can always take yourself back a little bit more so that you're in a comfortable place. Remember, you don't have to do the range of motion or like the full range of motion that you think you have in order to get well. What your ability to get well and your ability to get stronger is all based in, a big piece of it is all based on how you're moving. Okay, so that's how you're moving is more important than how much you're moving. Okay? So being here, easy, easy, easy breathing here. Super easy. Okay, and then pay attention to this right leg and this left leg and see if you can feel them and feel your pelvis here on the ground and let the legs, like wooden telephone poles, sink into the mud. And now we're going to take this right leg, pelvis is quiet, lift that off the wall and cross it. And just notice as you lift it, this pelvis should stay quiet. It's just the leg bone moving. And then once you're there, allow that leg to rotate a little bit and gently bring it down. Now you move in the range that makes sense for you, right? So if you're only coming to here, you come to here, right? And so what's making sense? Making sense is that your pelvis is still quiet, there's no pain or strain, there's no symptoms increasing. So again, just because you can go all the way doesn't mean that it's necessary or that it's even helpful. The other thing to watch for is if you want to bring your arms into it and bring the hands into it. If the arms and hands want to come into it, then you are you're using external force to do the movement. And we want to help train the leg bone to move in the pelvis better, not train the arm bones how to move the leg better. So letting that leg bone move in the pelvis. So my butt, my rotators are doing the movement. My hip flexor, my hand is. Those guys, as we go out, they're soft. All of this up here is relaxed. Good. And then take that leg up. Good. Other side. Cross that leg. Now as you're moving, just check in with your breath. And notice if your breath wants to be held. And then see if you can move in a range where your breath can just be naturally easy. Good. And then bring that up. Okay. So now we're going to move back a little bit here. And about to 90 degrees at the hips here. Right, and just stay here for a sec. The feet are on the wall. Feel the ball of the foot, the base of the pinky toe, and the center of the heel. And then still feel the legs a little heavy. As they sink, if you can, feel them down to your pelvis. And then bring the legs a little wide and rotate the leg bones so those feet turn out. So it's not just turning the feet out, because we can turn the feet out without moving the hips. I want you to think about moving the hips. Now the legs aren't falling out like this. I want you to keep the ball of the foot, the base of the pinky toe, and the center of the heel on the wall. Yeah. Okay. Now what's going to happen is we're going to let this left leg, or the leg that for me is furthest away from the camera, I'm going to move that towards the floor as I follow it along. Good. And then leg comes up, foot comes up on the wall, and then we're going to come over the other side. So the leg bone moves in the socket. Now if it's a little bit, if you need a little bit more help with coordination, you can just keep your feet on the wall for a little bit of extra support, but the one leg moves first and the second leg moves second. Now you'll notice as you move, particularly as the second leg meets the first, that the knees might not be directly over top of each other. That's a result of not being fully twisted, which is totally fine. It's more I want you to notice where they land, and don't try to get the knees on top of each other. Just notice where the actual limitation is coming from. And your shoulder girdle is on the ground easy. Easy breath as you move. Okay, last one. Good. And then here you are. Okay. See if you can feel into your pelvic floor the 3 orifices, or 2, depending on who you are, of your pelvic floor. And see if you can breathe into those orifices. Not forcing it, just see if you can feel the bottom of that pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is both the floor of the pelvis, right, and the torso, as well as the passageway for fluid and matter. So it needs to be strong, but it also needs to be open or supple. Yeah? So notice if you can feel the floor of your pelvis. Notice if you can feel those orifices. Particularly in times like this, we can sometimes be like a dog with the tail coming between the legs and protecting our sensitive areas. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if you feel a little bit tighter or more constricted or pulled up in your pelvic floor. Not uncommon at all. Okay, now begin to roll it over and come on up into hands and knees. So into hands and knees, we're going to cross one leg over behind the other. And the feet are going to come wide. So I'm going to turn backwards. Feet are going to turn wide. And with the feet wide, which is not really what they are, the feet haven't become wide. I've just rotated my leg bones. That's what's made them wide. I'm going to move my hips between my heels, but I'm not going to fall over onto one more than the other. I'm going to really keep my movement square to the direction I'm going. So if you feel like you're weaving over to one side or the other, that lets you know that there's something up in your movement pattern. So just move in the range of motion where that does not happen. Okay, good. And then uncross, and then cross. Really, really gentle here. This front knee will come up as you move. Okay, and uncross, come over into gate pose. Okay. Your toes, that's where they get placed, is a relationship of what's going on in your leg bone movement in your pelvis. So your feet can be there, your feet can be here. It all depends on, notice what goes on with this pelvis, yeah? Okay. And then from here, big beach ball, side bend over. Wherever that foot's placed, feel the center of the heel, the ball of the foot, and the base of the pinky toe. And if this arm comes on up, go for it. So the tricky thing with warrior positions is that one leg is doing one thing and the other leg is doing the other thing. So we're doing a gateway on this side, which puts the SI joint already into an unstable position, and that is not a bad thing at all. Not at all. But it can be tricky, yeah? Because it's unstable and then we start to move in a really poor way, then we can create all sorts of issues. It's one of the reasons why yoga can have such a bad reputation around SI joint issues, but it's not really yoga that's the fault. It's how we're practicing. It's us human beings. So when us human beings grow our awareness of our movement patterns, we can create all sorts of really, really cool stuff. Okay, and then let's come forward into a lunge. So one leg comes forward. Now remember, the idea here is that the pelvis is going to stay level, right? The pelvis is here, whoops, and level it stays. Yeah, right? We're not doing this. I mean, there will be a little bit of anterior tilt, but there's a distinction between just dropping through your pelvis like this and arching through your back versus that pelvis staying level and coming forward. Because the leg bone only has about 3 to 11 degrees of just movement of extension in that hip socket. So the pelvis will have some anterior tilt, but lots of times we just move there So don't try and hold that pelvis, and then just don't collapse either. Okay, now, watch my little side bend here. Do your best not to let that pelvis scooch out to the side. Make it small if you need to. Remember, this is about your capability, not pushing your capacity. You can't have capacity without capability. Yeah, okay, and then come on up. Good, now we're going to do a bit of a twist. So rib cage is here, pelvis is here, pelvis will stay facing there, and rib cage will move. So the obliques are the ones that are doing the work. You notice I haven't got the arms involved at all today. And that's completely and totally on purpose. Because remember, I'm not so much interested in giving you a big stretch. If you have one, awesome. But stretch doesn't really give you anything. It makes you, it's kind of juicy and yummy, but it doesn't let you know that you're doing anything right or anything wrong. Whereas when we improve our function for real, that's when we improve our coordinating patterns. Here, we're going to come forward first. And that's when we set the foundation for great strength. Right? And that's when strength just naturally improves and tension starts to fade away because we're actually moving the body the way the body is designed to move. It's not rocket science. It's actually quite simple. The trouble is that our minds can be very ambitious. Okay, good. And then let's lean over to the side. And sometimes the ambition of our mind does not match the function of our body. And we let ambition trump patience. And so when you grow this patience and this presence with your body, really, really cool stuff starts to happen. Not just in your body, okay, let's take a twist, but it bubbles over into the rest of your life because you have more ease, you have more groundedness, you have more calm. That's a lot more sustainable. And instead of just doing a practice and then burning all the energy up the next day or later that day, you're just more connected and clued in overall. And so that builds your ability to be grounded for a longer time. That builds your ability to be calmer for a longer time. So then you, more of who you are, is expressed. So it starts with our bodies, but then the change is just crazily awesome. That's why I love yoga. Okay, we're going to come up. Because whenever I help someone recover, it's never really about getting out of pain. I mean, it is. That's where it starts. It's not where it continues. If you really want to heal, it's more than just the body. Okay, so here's the pelvis. We're going to keep the pelvis square. We're going to rotate those leg bones out. Remember, even though the feet are moving, it's the leg bones in the hip socket that are doing the movement. The feet just follow along. And we're now going to just drop down. Okay, good. And then come on up now. I want you to feel 3 points in the bottom of your feet. Center of your heel, ball of your foot, base of your pinky toe. Drop on down. Easy, easy breath. Okay, I'm going to put this pelvis down. Take your hands to the outside of the thighs. Press the thighs back into the hands. Good. And then come up. And then let's drop on down. And those legs come back. Toes are relaxed. Good, and then come on up. All right, now legs come close together. You can hold onto the wall for this next one if you need to or want to. You're going to take one foot up, bring that ankle up onto the knee. Pelvis is level the entire way. Start to move at the hip, the knee, and the ankle, coming on down. So it's not dropping the upper body down. It's letting the legs come up. So this is flexion of the hip, but the legs are coming up towards your belly. Now my hand's just resting here. I'm not pushing this down. I'm just resting my hand. Let me put it here so it's not confusing. Okay. Good. Now from here, we're going to step this leg back into a high lunge. And then from here, we're going to come back into standing. Okay, now other side. Up. Now the pelvis, watch, it's the leg bone motion, right? Leg bone motion, pelvis is level. And now we start to move at the hips, knees, and ankles. Now if you're holding onto the wall, you kind of, like a lot of people will try to do this to get their hand off the wall. And then they lose their balance. The other thing they'll do is they'll push themselves off the wall like that, or as they go, their pelvis might move like this. So what I recommend is come closer to the wall, and then slowly think about taking a little bit of pressure away from that hand, let more weight come into the leg, take a little bit more, so you'll see I'm taking my fingers off, and so more weights come into this leg as a result of more points of my fingers coming off. And then I slowly peel this off, but because I'm taking off this point of support, my leg has to be the one to take it. And so if you don't have it, you're going to notice this starting to occur with your pelvis, yeah? Or you'll brace in through your ribs or somewhere through your leg. And the idea is not to be your hand to be off the wall. The idea is to be able to have the leg support you, because it's your foot is the only thing on that's now connected to the floor. So your leg has to bear the load. So feel it gently, gently. And if you can't do it, then just be here. That's all good. And then come back into lunge. Step by step. It does not matter how old you are. You can improve how the tissue feels and functions. In the early stages of my career, everybody was older than me, and most of my clients were over 55. So here I am, 20-something, and people were getting out of pain faster. And so I would hear them say to me how their professionals would tell them, well, you know, it took you this long to get into pain, it's going to take you that long to get out. And that was just a bunch of baloney. Because if that was the case, and they're coming up, let's bring the legs wide again. If that was the case, I would not be here today doing this video for you. You can get out of pain very fast. You can improve function very, very fast. We just don't think about it. We just don't think about it. Sometimes we get caught up in the exercise as opposed to the movement. So when we become aware of how we're actually moving, then we can actually address the actual issue. But if we're just blasting through exercises, we aren't paying attention. We can't change anything. I'm getting a little hot under the collar, aren't I? I'm just mildly passionate about the topic. Okay, come on up. Good. Okay, now let's just come into standing and notice where you're at. Okay? You might be feeling a difference here. Okay, now we're going to come back, and now we're going to come into Warrior 2. Okay, so we're here. Here's my pelvis, the edge of, or the crest of my pelvis. Watch this. I'm going to rotate this leg bone. The pelvis will move. Right? The pelvis will move. And we're going to put ourselves down. Now you always want to make sure that pelvis hasn't done this. So lots of times people can drop this foot, and then that's what happens to the pelvis. Avoid that. Just avoid it, because now what you're setting up is you're setting up an unstable place to start, and you're like, oh, oops, I better reconnect. But you aren't reconnecting. You're just compensating on top of another compensation. So you're here. You've rotated. The pelvis has come around wherever it's come around. You've dropped that foot. Pelvis is level. And the thing, too, is if your pelvis is becoming unlevel when you drop that foot, that gives you an indication that there's something up between your pelvis and your foot. So there's something in regards to how that pelvis and the leg bone are moving. That's actually good news. Yeah. Now with this back leg, you can do whatever you want with it. You can rotate or you can leave it where it is. Totally up to you. Okay. Good. Now, those arms might be too high for you, so if you need to bring them here, do that. Okay, good. And come on up and rotate. Okay, notice what happens. So we've rotated. That pelvis may have come around. Yeah. Drop the leg and then move into the movement. Or drop the foot, rather. So just pay really close attention to this. So many people will compensate and then they'll recompensate. And you're not actually improving anything when you do that. So you can see why yoga starts to get this really, really crappy reputation for being unsafe when it's not unsafe at all. It's this thing called us who are practicing. And if we can have some humor about it and not get too wrapped up in, well, Susie, you're being mean. I'm not being mean. We need to have a sense of humor about ourselves and our movement and improve it at the same time. Okay, now you can see here that where my angle of my knee is here and my hip. Okay, so instead of shoving that knee forward, then what I want you to think about is dropping the pelvis down, right? So I'm going to come forward, but I want you to think more of it as a coming down. The list leg bone is coming up towards you as opposed to just shoving yourself forward. Think about it coming down. It's going to be a lot more challenging through that leg. Yeah, all right, let's go for the other side. And we're setting up. Now, if you need to take your legs wider, go for it. But what you're paying attention to is what's you're actually feeling. Like there should be nothing. Like there should be, as you're coming into this position, you shouldn't feel anything in terms of strain or sensation or anything in through the back of your pelvis or your back or your knees. Yeah, and so then the movement as you're coming down like so. So that pelvis is dropping down. You're going to have more flexion in that knee, but you're not shoving yourself forward. Yeah. And if you notice yourself that your pelvis is becoming I think mine did on that last one just a little bit. I'll have to look back at that just to see. But if you notice yourself as you lower, you do something like this. See how I shortened up? That's an indication to know that you don't have the function to go that low. Or you're just unaware of that movement. It could just, I was just jabbering off, so I wasn't aware. So that may have happened on the other side. Yeah, and so then you stay really connected and aware as you move. So when you lose all those cues about, what you're doing with the back leg and the foot and all that, notice if you have to add those, the deeper you come into the position. Because if you are, that tells you you've lost your function, so you shouldn't be at the depth anyway. Depth just doesn't arise. Depth arises out of good function. You don't have to put yourself into deep. Deep arises because you're moving better. Yeah? Okay, good. And then come on up. Now let's come up into standing. Okay? And what are things feeling like? All right, now we're going to take the strap. You're going to bring the strap like so into a loop. Good. And then the loop's going to be about shoulder width apart. We're just going to take a moment in Tadasana with your arms in behind you. So you'll be here. Okay. And then the arms will move into extension. Okay. And then I want you to bend the elbows if you can. Now again, this shouldn't be so tight that your hands are getting blue or they're getting full and that fluid can't move back to the center of your body. And your ribs are not poking out. You also don't have to knit them in. Really, from wherever you are in Tadasana, the articulating joint is your arm bone in the shoulder socket, and then you bend the elbows. And now, be aware of what's going on in your upper body while you also feel your feet. The center of the heel, the ball of the foot, and the base of the pinky toe. good. And let that come down. And then bring the strap over one shoulder. So it's over one shoulder like this. And this arm's going to come in behind. This arm's going to come up and grab hold of the strap. So you're like this. So again, you might be able to reach for your hands. You can if you want to. Just watch if you've had to do this to get there and you've had to wiggle yourself to get into, because the pose, the final position is not at all what is going to give you the juice. It's how you move into it, right? So if you're compensating like crap to get there, then what's the point? It just trains your mind and your brain that that's what your movement is, which is a really poor foundation. Okay, and then other side. Now sometimes another thing that can happen is not just the ribs coming forward, but you can move to the side. Sometimes when that arm can't go into rotation, then this part shortens up. So that's another thing for you to notice if you do that. The articulating joint is your shoulder and your elbow, right? And so we're moving this, and then we're bringing it back. Good. Okay, let's come on back. All right, now we're going to leave that strap to the side and move that pelvis off to the side. We're now going to move into a warrior two against the wall. So this is where we needed some wall space, really. So you're against the wall like this, and I'll also show it from this back wall too, so you can see both. We're going to rotate the leg bones out. Or sorry, let me rephrase that. You're going to rotate this leg bone like you're coming into warrior two, which is what you are. And then you're going to place the block between the thigh and the wall. Okay, so that's what it looks like on that side. If you do it from here, my legs are here. I rotate this leg bone. I'm coming into my warrior two, and I place the block. Okay, so again, the same thing can still happen. That pelvis can do that motion. So again, when you're setting yourself up and you're coming into the position, it's not way up by your bum. It's sort of halfway-ish between your leg bone and your knee. Right, and so now you need to hold on. Let me come closer to you over here. Now you need to hold on to that block. And so you might feel a little bit of some release in through the front, or you might feel a stretch in the front in the inner leg line. You might feel some strength in through your butt. You don't want to feel like you're having to hold through your outer shin. So where your pronoid muscles are, that ought not to be the part that's holding the block against the wall, because the block's not being held over there, and that's not its job. The job to hold the block is your outer hip. Okay, so if you're having strain down there, then just take this leg out a little bit, so you're coming more in between a warrior two and a warrior one. And this just lets you know that there's something going on here between your leg and your pelvis and your leg. No biggie. So then as you're here, and as you play with this in your own practice, then over time you can slowly bring yourself back closer and closer towards the wall, right? And then you can play around with bringing the arms out and up. I remember this image very distinctly way back in the day when I was teaching therapeutic yoga classes. And there was a woman who had a lot of back pain and SI joint issues and shoulder issues, and she came here and she was working here, and she could bring her arms this far. And then the next week when she came back, she would bring her arms this far. And the next week when she came back, she could bring the arms this far. And so it was just progressive, because she was specific and accurate and consistent with her practice. She was able to get to where she wanted to get to in very, very, very quick time. Okay? And she didn't push past what she actually could do. Right? She just stayed in the range that she had. Okay, so from there, let's go to the other side. I'll go over onto this wall. Now what can sometimes happen is if you don't have, right, if you don't have the range, the strength, or the stability, that will happen. So that's what makes the block a really handy little tool, is you really can see, you really can see where you're at. Now, if you keep dropping it down because there's some level of weakness or there's just a poor coordinated pattern, then you could take that pelvis out. And so now you're away from the wall like I showed you. Okay? And you can just kind of work that. Like you could work right, you could be right, you could be here, set yourself up. This leg pushes, come back a little bit more to the wall, and that leg. So you want to be close enough to the wall, like the distance from the wall is about this amount, and then you play with your booty, and you think about where your booty is, because some of us have a bigger behind, so then obviously that's going to impact where you're positioned. The arms can be here, or you may also be here. Okay, good. Now come away from that. Come over to the floor. Okay, let's see where you're at. Okay, rotate. Hold on a sec. I did something funny there with my pelvis. There we go. Now play around with where this feels in your body. Pelvis can drop down. And you're feeling those 3 points in the bottom of your feet. And your toes are relaxed, right? And you can bring the arms up. Good. And then come up. All right. And then rotate the other side out. Good. And then come on down. And then again, notice what your breathing is doing too, right? Okay, and then come on up. Okay, let's grab your block. And from here, you've seen me do this before if you've been following me, is that we're going to take the foot onto the block. With the pelvis steady, we're just going to swing the leg bone in the hip socket. Right, so we're going to find that 3 to 11 degrees of motion so that the pelvis doesn't need to go into an anterior tilt. Now, still what's interesting is that the psoas muscle, which has fibers that attach between about T12 or L1 and then each of the lumbar vertebrae and then onto the leg bone. What's cool is that that's a bridge between your spine and your leg. And so that's being impacted. But I still want you to keep your pelvis not moving into an anterior tilt. Keep the movement really, really, really small. Okay, and watch that the knee is not generating the movement. The movement is being generated from the hip. Okay, good. And then come on down and notice what feels now. And then other side. Pelvis is level. Good. Okay, good. And then stand. So let's come back into Warrior 2. whatever you do with this back leg, you choose, and then thinking about coming down. If you want to take your hand to the outside of the thigh, you can press that thigh into the hand. As you lower, pelvis is level. So Warrior 2, it can get a lot of bad rap. I think it's one of the yummiest positions out there simply because we have to rotate this leg bone and we have to coordinate that with the pelvis and with this back leg, and we get to then get some strengthening mobility work as we come into it, and pay really close attention because this inner leg line from the ankles up through to here, it's going to sound funny, but in order to bring the legs wide, it has to release, right? So, and we're also in standing, so there's also some strengthening. So it's not like releasing, but in order for the movement to happen, it needs to release. But now we've got some strength going through all this. So it's a terrific position if you can do it, which is why we were doing all that smaller movement early on, not just jumping into Warrior 2, but really focusing in on how this leg bone, these leg bones are moving in the pelvis, and then just noticing, I'm coming up a little bit because I was just noticing something funky going on between my legs and my pelvis. And doing that, like noticing, it's like I kind of noticed that happening a bit, so I just came up a little bit to a place where that was level, and then I just started to lower back down again. And then I can feel, it's like, ooh, there's something right in there that's getting a little bit snaggy, and I don't just go, okay, I'm going to push by it and just to go deeper. It's like, all right, that's where my capability is right now. That's what we can pay attention to. Yeah? Place the hand on the outside of the thigh if you want. Press that out. You bring the arms up. Because you've got one leg doing one thing and the other leg doing the other thing, it can be really awesome. Right? In terms of coordinating patterns and messing with your brain in terms of how to move. So long as you can move well and pay attention, right? Okay, coming up. Good, and then come back. All right, now let's see where you're at and what that feels like. And how much taller you feel, perhaps. Yeah? All right, now come on down to the floor. If you're all interested in learning how to squat, that's kind of one of my things I'm playing with these days is squatting. And when I'm with my kids, when I'm talking with them, I get right down to their level. So rather than leaning over, I squat right down with my 3-year-olds. All right, so bringing the palms together here for a moment, and then just do a twist through your rib cage. Okay, we're keeping the arms out of it, and then twist through the rib cage. Okay. And then arms come up. Let's circle them around. Okay, and then other way. Okay, now keeping them up, I'm going to turn them one direction and pull slightly with the back arm. And just make sure that it's an arm motion. Good, and then other side. And this will be the last movement that we're going to do. And then coming on back here and connecting into your breathing. You can close your eyes and just feel what it is that you feel like. How is your breath moving in your body now? Check in with your pelvic floor and see if the breath is touching or connecting to, is the pelvic floor moving with the breathing? And it may or it may not be. It's not that it has to be. It's just I want you to pay attention to it. Because like I said, these COVID times can have us like a dog with its tail between the legs, and then it can protect to the sensitive areas. So just notice if that's what's happening down there. And you don't need to change it. If that's what your system is doing, then that's what your system is doing. Just pay attention to what it is doing. There's nothing wrong. It's all normal. It's all perfect. Easy, easy, easy breath. And now soften the inner corners of your eyes. And this might sound funny, I want you to soften your tongue. Feel the space between your two ears. And feel the air coming in and the movement of the rib cage. Now you can be here for as long as you want. You can be in Shavasana if you'd want. Whenever you're ready to move on, take another 5 more breaths and count them on your exhale. And then move on with the rest of your day. All right. Have a really, really lovely day, and we will see you in the morning. Take good care.